evening and welcome to the Velocity of Now with me, your host Thomas Sheridan. It is the 6th of June, D-Day 2018, and no matter what time it is in the world, day, night, whatever, I hope you're all keeping well. I wish I could do these kind of broadcasts more often, but you know yourself, I'm extremely busy and there just isn't a time out there anymore, and as much as they are fun, and I would, if someone ever paid me to do them, I'd do them 5 days a week. But as it stands, I have other priorities. I have to make money in other ways and pay my bills just like anyone else. But I'm glad you're still here. I'm glad you're still holding on. I'm glad you're still listening. And if the numbers on my YouTube channels are anything to go by, you're coming in greater numbers. There's over 5 million views between the two channels, Thomas Sheridan Arts and Open Source Occult TV, and there's over 30,000 subscribers. But I feel we're on just scratching the surface, so we can do a lot better, and we will do a lot better. Things are changing, the world is changing, and we're all changing together. What was considered sacrosanct last year could be an apostate this year, and so on. Always keep your mind open, always remain flexible, always adapt when new information comes in, and never follow dogma, any kind of dogma. All dogma will destroy you. Now, if you want to look at my website, it's thomassheridanarts.com. My other website is streetdruid.net. I've also got another YouTube channel, along with this one, Open Source Occult TV. Please subscribe, share articles, do whatever you can. If you can buy a book, come to a conference, come to a talk, whatever, that would be fantastic. Now, speaking of conferences, I'm not long back from a fantastic tour of the UK, speaking at some big venues and small venues, and all of them were all packed out. It was wonderful to see. It was like packed out, and standing ovations would really sum it all up. There's a real movement there now for some real different knowledge, but delivered in a positive style. People are sick and tired of all the doom and gloom, and also the hypocrisy. People are getting tired of, certain individuals who warn them about the dangers of Wi-Fi, and then they're using their Wi-Fi to broadcast their own shows on, and so on. This is ridiculous. People are starting to see through this stuff. That doesn't mean everything these people say is bogus or you shouldn't listen to them, but it's gone beyond that. They're putting you in fear of things they use themselves. Just like if they're telling you things to like, don't pay your mortgage when you find that they're paying their mortgage. Don't listen to these people. Just do your own path in life. Gather in as much information, and don't listen to me either. Just gather in as much information in life you can. Create a cornucopia of wisdom, enlightenment, and knowledge, and feed from and reject accordingly. This is your life, your monomyth, your story, and your outcome. And it's up to you to find your own path. People like me, all we do is we supply you a map of the territory. It's your job to get out there and explore. Now, yeah, it was great over in England. Had a fantastic time. Just wonderful. Just oceans and oceans and oceans of love that came my way. And it's wonderful. And I'm eternally grateful to everyone who's there and who comes to see me and comes up to talk to me afterwards. And will come just to say nice things or ask me questions. There's so much affection shown. It's really quite beautiful, very touching at times. And don't think I don't appreciate any of you or don't love you, any of you. I do very much indeed. And it's just that I'm not Mr. Mushy, and that's not my personality type. But believe me, deep down inside, and not even that deep down inside, just below the surface, my heart is singing. So always know that I'm grateful for your support, even if you only have the chance to ever listen to this show and share it or tell people about something you heard me say that you really liked. I'll always be eternally grateful to you all, and I take none of you for granted. Always remember that. I came from nothing. I'll probably end up with nothing, but along the way there was more than a few sparkly jewels came into my path, and every single one of them are precious to me, and that includes all you guys. Now, speaking of other events, I'm going to be in Austria at the Uttensberg, the very interesting sacred mountain with Cara St. Louis and Maria Wheatley. That will be in the beginning of September. So if you live in Central Europe, Austria, Bavaria, it's in Salzburg, it's near Salzburg, or the Czech Republic, that part of the world, you have an ample chance to come and see me and take part in a very interesting event there. We're going to be basically, well, I will anyway. I'll be performing something of a kind of an unspoken passive ritual in the heart of a very magical landscape. That's the Uttensberg mountain range or mountain just outside Salzburg, with its numerous tunnels, paranormal lore, mystical associations, and so on. And I'm delighted to be able to go there and talk about this. And I'll also be basically, I have been knee deep lately in researching for my follow up to Walpurgis Volume 1, Walpurgis Night Volume 1, with Walpurgis Night Volume 2, and people coming to that will get an insight of the kind of way I'm going to take it. I'm not going to write another book on the Nazi occult just for the sake of it, to cover ground other people do. I don't do that. I'm not interested in covering other people's ground. What I'll do is I always look for an unusual or a novel angle to hang the narrative off. Now, my original intention was for Walpurgis Night Volume 2 to be based around the mind control aspects of the Third Reich, because I came into contact with a gentleman whose father was heavily involved in the sound engineering for the Nazi rallies. Unfortunately, before I got a chance to go to Germany and talk to the man, he died. And his sister doesn't speak very well good English, and so that's kind of over. So we have to move on to something else, and that was what caused the delay in that book and that project. But it is coming out. There's lots of other things coming out. I have lots of films planned for the future, lots of new locations around Europe I'll be visiting and around the world to give you my insight either into occult, esotericism, esoteric matters, Fortean, and of course megaliths and all that kind of good stuff we all love, and especially magic. We all love that. Funny, now speaking of magic, I was looking on a group the other day, just passively observing, and it was some guy saying, well, it was a good point by the skeptic guy, and he says, well, if magic is just about powering your will into reality, then how come someone masturbating over someone they fancy doesn't end up with them having sex? And I didn't answer there, but I'll answer it here. It absolutely does. There are millions upon millions upon millions upon millions of men and women on this planet who took a fancy to somebody at work, to somebody in their neighborhood, in their building, that they were associated in their social circle, and they started masturbating and imagining themselves having sex with them. And guess what? Many of them ended, not many of them, but quite a lot of them would end up having sex with that person after they established a relationship. And that's proof that does work. The issue is, and the key factor in this always is limitations and accessibility. If you're gonna whack off to a Playboy model or some top Hollywood movie star, and you live in the arse end of nowhere, you're not going to ever get that. You always work in magic within your own personal limitations. Very, very important. So now, sometimes you do get it, but then again, you still have to be on the path towards that. There's always I remember reading Michael Caine's biography years ago, and he saw his future wife doing a coffee commercial, and he said he was really turned on by her, suggesting that he threw a few grannies off the bus thinking about her, and lo and behold, he marries her. So don't give me this thing that's a good example of proving why magic doesn't work. That's actually a very good example of proving how magic does work. Because there's lots and lots of people who took a shine to someone they knew personally in their social circle, or in their friendship circle, and they imagined themselves having sex with them, seeing them naked, and guess what? It happened. It's happened to many people listening to this show. And don't tell. So that's a very simple example of how powering the will into manifestation is undertaken. It works and it reels, and you can just say, oh, it's just because you were so horny or you're hitting on that person. Look, it takes two to tango. You could be as horny as you want for a person, but they're not going to be attracted to you unless there's some kind of special, shall we say, charisma. Now, if you're masturbating about them, again, this show is not for children, by the way. Like all my work, it's not for anyone under 16. So don't give me that crap. So if you're if you're masturbating about someone, and it depends on how you do it. If it's really violent and nasty, and it's just a kind of a pornographic, lewd, like oh, I'd really do this, bang, 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 this kind of thing, and tear up shit, and use all that kind of language while you're thinking about them, nothing will come of it. However, if you masturbate about this person in a sympathetic way, in a kind of a way that you're also pleasuring them, also this kind of thing, and showing your affection and appreciation for them, you will develop the charismatic charge that will draw them towards you. So remember that, wankers, you're magical wankers. Now, there seems to be a lot of interest in the book Sorcery, The Invocation of Strangers, which I wrote, and it's selling okay. It's not bad at all. It's ticking along nicely, I have to say, so thank you for that. But more importantly, well, not more importantly, but equally as importantly, it's getting absolute rave reviews. Anyone who's read the book is telling me it's the best book on the topic they've ever read, or even if they never read a book on the topic, they said they found it fantastically interesting. They loved every minute of it, and they loved the writing style that I do, and so on. And so that's great. I'm delighted for that, and that's really what I hoped for. And I wanted to write a book that would be a kind of a book that would stir people's minds, and like all my books are like that, but I think I really nailed it with Sorcery. I think I really nailed the book I always wanted to write in that, and it's really, really getting great reviews. And if you live in the Southern Hemisphere, the Australian magazine New Dawn is basically covering me quite a lot this summer. They're publishing articles by myself, along with other, very, very good people like Gary Lackman and Greg Moffat and others, Patrick Henningsen, who I know quite well. And it's well worth reading the magazine. It's hard to get in the Northern Hemisphere. It's very popular in Australia, New Zealand, and South Africa. But the coverage that they're giving me this summer is absolutely fantastic, and I'm really delighted about that. It's like, and also David Halpin, who's a chap here in Ireland in County Carlow, who runs the occult book review channel. Definitely check that out. He does some stuff for that magazine as well. That's a very good channel to subscribe to if you're interested in occult books. He does really good reviews of them, and he also has a good page on megaliths and things like that on his Facebook page. So he's into a lot of the same things I'm into. Although I do more the true crime kind of end of things as well, more add to that. But he's really doing some good work there. So check out his work. That's the occult book review channel on YouTube. But he writes for that magazine. So if you live in Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, or in the Southern Hemisphere, or if you can find a stockist of the magazine in the Northern Hemisphere, or even go to their website, the New Dawn website, and subscribe, it's an excellent magazine. The way I would describe it is kind of like a halfway point between 14 Times and Nexus. So like that's how I describe it. So there's like something for everybody in it, and if you like the conspiratorial stuff, plenty of that. If you like the kind of the stuff to do with like magic and megaliths and stuff like that, they've done some great coverage of my work on that in the past. So always keep something to look out for if you live down in the bottom of the earth. Not that far, not all the way to Antarctica. Although who knows, maybe there's a new news agent down there that sells it. Now, talking about true crime. Well, it looks like the Manchester Pusher story is back in the news again. There was one recent story of a cyclist who said that a complete psycho tried to attack him and throw him into the canal. I think it was the Manchester Ship Canal. I discounted that story. I don't know if I actually even believe it. I think either it was just a regular thug that had a go at him, or the guy's making the story up. I didn't like the term he used, the complete psychopath. It was almost like he was looking for attention in that sense. But unfortunately, another young chap was been found dead the other night in, again, the Rochdale Canal. And here we go again. The police are saying it's an urban myth. It doesn't exist. Now, if you watch Rich D. Hall's documentaries and films on his channel, Rich Planet, you'll notice a common theme that the British police, they're not allowed to examine cases fully. It doesn't mean that the cops are all bent or the cops are all lazy or keystone cops. Of course, you do get that as well, but there are limiters put on their investigations all the time, and he shows this quite succinctly with the Maddie McCann case, and also with his latest film on the murder of the British TV presenter Jill Dando. Very good. I totally recommend the man's work, and he's one of the few people doing investigative journalism in alt media that's doing bloody good work, and deserves the biggest audience he can get. So check Rich Planet out documentary on that. But the same thing is happening in Manchester. They practically ridiculed me with all the major coverage I got in all the mainstream media on my blind spot film, and even a recent TV show, a very popular one called The Right Stuff, in England, were slagging me off. Well, they're not slagging me off, but saying that it was preposterous. They were playing the government line again. So there's something very serious and sinister going on in Manchester with the canal killings. Now, the latest murder of the young man happened right where in the stretch of the canal between Oxford Street and the back of Jury's Hotel, along the Rochdale Canal, where I was walking and filming for the blind spot video, and I was basically stalked by a stranger that was like quite a tall guy in a hoodie. Now, I know you get that thing in Manchester all the time, but I'm not like, some kind of green green farm boy. I grew up on a tough neighborhood, inner city neighborhood, and I know my way around the streets, and I understand the energies of the streets, the dynamics of the streets, and this was not a good feeling. And it was in that same location that this young chap was found dead the other night. Now, in many of the other cases of the Manchester pusher, there's been a tendency for it to happen in winter. Then you could say, okay, now the canals, except for the Manchester Ship Canal, the network of canals that are in Manchester are very shallow. A lot of them you can stand up in, and it would probably only be up to your chest in a normal adult male or female. That's how deep they are, because they're only made for those narrow boats. They're not like the canals you get in Holland, or even the ones here in Ireland that connect with, the canals in Ireland are much bigger because they feed into the Shannon navigation system. And the Shannon is like such a massive river that at some points you can barely see the other bank from one side. And so canal barges in Ireland have to be made bigger to deal with the wider canals. So they're very similar to the canal systems in Holland and in Germany. So in England, because the navigation system does not use major rivers, they have things called longboats or narrow boats, and they're narrow longboats, and they can be. That's how they were. That's traditional style. So the canals didn't have to be built to very large engineering. They're quite modest in their specification and their scale. Although the network is vast and complex and was as a major engine of the British Industrial Revolution, the canals themselves they're quite modest in their scale, the locks and so on. Even though there's lots of locks in certain plots, the canal, the basin itself, the infrastructure is quite narrow. So to accommodate these narrow boats, because that's all they need, narrow long boats. And if you fall in, it's very easy to get out, or to stand up and wait for someone to get you. Now in winter, even if you couldn't swim, you'll eventually find your feet and stand up. With winter, there's the added risk of hypothermia. So if you were drugged or had chloroform or hit on the back of the head and fell into the frigid cold water, the cold north of England, freezing frigid water would probably kill you in no time. You'd fall asleep and you wouldn't wake up. So in the terms of the winter time elements of the pusher story and the tragic deaths, we can say that hypothermia probably did play a part, as it's unless you were totally incapable of any kind of swimming or were very short, you would probably be standing up in the water wading your way back towards the bank. Now these recent killings, this recent one in the Rochdale Canal at the back of Jury's Hotel, is in summertime. The water will be much warmer. It'd be much warmer, so hypothermia would not be an issue, and this young lad has been found dead. Now, and the police are ridiculing it. And of course, I go over to the newspaper Facebook pages or the Manchester Facebook pages. The vast majority will say there's definitely something going on. The numbers are off the scale. Well, of course they're off the scale. Birmingham, a nearby city, well, 100 miles or so away, is covered in canals, and that they do not have, and the same kind of, it's a very large, heavily populated city centre, and they do not have anything like the numbers you get in Manchester. Nothing. And then, of course, you get the usual spooks and shills and people who adore and worship their governments who say things like, well, the numbers in Amsterdam were much higher. They use that mantra is back again. Now, anyone who knows and has followed my investigation into the Manchester pusher knows that I went to Amsterdam, examined the canals, spoke to the police, and they said the Manchester police were lying. Now, in the Amsterdam canals, you're kind of screwed if you fall in, big time, because a lot of them have these railings that are about like 4 inches off the ground. There's no safety guards, and if you were walking up there or backing up there, you trip on that rail, and then you drop a fair distance down. I'm talking about 20 feet into the water, into deep frigid water. There's canals, and Holland gets extremely cold in winter. If you could fell in summertime, you'd be okay, but if you're drunk, you're screwed late at night. Someone would just hear a splash, and that's the end of you. And most of the people they found in the canals in Manchester were people who were highly intoxicated and were taking a piss in the canal, and they fell or stumbled in while they were heavily drunk. And you know this because their trousers were down, their zippers were open, and their willies were out, and this kind of thing. And that's how they knew they fell down into the canal peeing. So, and that's the canals in Amsterdam. Remember, Amsterdam was part of a massive Dutch empire, the Dutch East India Company, and all this stuff. And those canals were made to take seriously big boats and even some seagoing vessels, or big ships that can go up the Rhine, right into the heart of the city. So they're very, very different in scale again than the Manchester canals. They're very big, deep, and they're very complex. There's lots of them. This kind of orbital ring of canals around the city centre. So the Manchester police are either ridiculing people or they're spoofing. And I told you the reason why. One, no police force anywhere in the world likes or wants to admit they have a serial killer on their doorstep, because they're almost impossible to find. All the main serial killers who've ever been found, they've either come forward or it's been a fluke, or that the police caught them. It was usually on parking tickets, or they made that one mistake, but then that's usually why. But then there's the psychopathic serial killers rather than the schizophrenic or the psychotic ones. Often don't mind being caught after a while, because they love the notoriety of being in a court and being the most evil person in the world. It really charges them and feeds them. We saw that with the Zodiac killer. Ramirez. They love Ricardo Ramirez, whatever his name was. They love it. They revel in it. They want to be caught after a while, and that's the difference. That's the difference. And then there's other psychopaths who don't want to be caught, and they love the thrill of the hunt and escaping. Jimmy Savile was a classic example of that. Now there's either that or there's something more sinister going on. Now, I've had a lot of people contact me about going on films and documentaries about something called the smiley face killer. I don't believe this theory at all. Now, yeah, you would believe it in a certain geographic location, but the idea is this smiley face killer traveling the world, killing people. 1 minute he's a Bigfoot inside Yosemite National Park or something like that, and the next thing he's in Manchester. I mean, it's just too much. It's just too big. Everything is regionalized. Like I said at the beginning of the show, everything is a microcosm. There's no, on a global scale, these things don't happen. They just don't happen. It's like when the Maddie McCann thing happened. Suddenly, every child on Earth that was ever abducted, and the McCanns played on this, was abducted by the same people who abducted Maddie McCann. So you had these ridiculous things of Jerry McCann and flying off to some, God knows where, because a child had been abducted in some country thousands of miles away. It's probably the same one that took his Madeline, and this kind of thing. Nonsense, pure nonsense. It doesn't happen like that. These are distractions. It's local. It's very local and it's very real. The Yorkshire Ripper was in Yorkshire. The Son of Sam killer was in New York. The Zodiac killer was in Los Angeles. It's always local. Always, always local. Now, on a consciousness level, these things are often and sometimes manifestations of broken or dysfunctional phenomena within the collective unconscious, and they cause the mentally ill and the psychotic and the psychopathic to charge up. Like when I get attacked online, it's always a flare-up of the mentally ill. They all trigger one another off. Even if they don't know each other, it all happens at the same time. It's connected to lunar cycles, or it's connected to phobias in the outside world, perhaps a war or something like that. I call it the Danzig effect. When there's an extreme level of social or psychic tension, it sets off all the Renfields and all the mentally ill, and they all panic and they all start attacking together at the same time. So that's, on the conscious level, we're often given insights into dysfunctionalities within the collective unconsciousness that manifest themselves in the present day reality. So in Ireland recently, we had, right before the abortion referendum, we had, which I supported at the legalisation of abortion in Ireland, and that doesn't mean I'm an abortion fan, as these Christian Catholic groups tried to make out. No, I'm not. But I understand that cancer happens during pregnancy and other things happen, rape, incest, and extreme deformities. And it's best to terminate the life of the child if that's what the mother wants. That's why I supported abortion, not because I think women are all sluts who won't use birth control or can't think for themselves or act responsibly when they're spreading their legs, as the Catholic Church and their supporters and their misogynistic crusaders were spouting constantly, as they love to degrade women while showing pictures of babies being aborted and acting as if women would enjoy doing this or they're turned on by it. And that's one of the main reasons I also voted yes, because I just was sickened by the behaviour of these maniacs. But anyway, regarding the abortion issue, right before it happened, there was random murders of young women in Ireland, in Dublin actually, and for no reason. It's like maniacs flared up and started killing young women, and they were caught in there. One of them was shot dead by the police, and this is because it was a last chance to get the bitches. You understand what I'm saying? There was a zeitgeist that had developed within Irish culture that women who have sex, and this comes out of the Catholic past, of the deep ancient past, they're whores and sluts and they're easy and they're just bitches, and they're bitches who should be disposed of. And you saw that, I even saw that in certain alt media figures in Ireland who were spouting that kind of mentality. And so the psychotics, the mentally ill, and the psychopaths wanted one. That's when I knew the yes vote was going to win, because if it wasn't going to win, there wouldn't be this horrific random attacks on women, because whatever entity inhabits these beasts, it had already known that the yes votes had happened, so they took the opportunity to slaughter these sluts as they saw them, these poor innocent young women. Why? Because it was one last chance to get at them, one last hurrah. They can't kill them with illegal backstreet abortions or force them into taking care of children they don't want or who are extremely deformed. So let's, in their demonic, psychotic, twisted, dark, pathological minds, operating as Renfields, they were flared up and they started randomly attacking women. And so unfortunately, you see this over and over again. Towards the end of World War II, there was, any Jews who were probably still around, there was a sudden rush to kill them quickly. in place just because, the Nazis are going to be gone soon. They're not going to take care of these Jews, and let's kill them. So the pathologicals will do this. There was one famous doctor in Paris who used to tell the local Jews that write letters to your family, I'll smuggle you to South America, and then he would kill them and chop them up and bury them in their garden and take all their belongings, because he knew the Nazis were leaving, and so he was going to make sure it's going to happen. In his psychotic, twisted, demented mind, the Cthulhus of the world are real. What happens in the depths of the subconscious mind is manifested within the body politic of man on the surface of the earth in tangible, materialistic form. It's real. If you want to know what's wrong with the world, you don't look at the world. You look at the subconscious mind behind it. This is why you have the likes of the Hillary Clintons and all the DNC trying to go, and all these lefties. I saw an article in The Guardian recently claiming that that it was books written in classic novels like The Great Gatsby and East of Eden, and authors like F. Scott Fitzgerald and Steinbeck and Hemingway are responsible for all the hatreds of women in the world, and therefore the voting of Trump, and therefore we should ban these books. I mean, this is how sick they are. No, the reason why Trump and Brexit went through is because those of us who can read the subconscious mind saw millions and millions of people who were sick and tired of being called racist, white trash, ignorant, rednecks, hillbillies, morons, stupid working class scum by wealthy elites and wealthy liberals who never ever had to struggle for anything in their lives, telling this. And that's how Trump got in. That's why millions of Americans who voted for Obama voted for Trump. Did they suddenly become racist overnight? No. Of course they didn't. What they did was the subconscious inferno directed towards them by these smug, arrogant cultural Marxists and other lefties became the turmoil which eventually savaged them upon the surface. Always look to the subconscious. The anvil of the psyche is the forge or the foundry of the reality that you live in. Always know this. Now, will the Manchester Pusher be ever found? I don't know. I probably don't think so. Is my prevailing theory is that it's a dysfunctional person or a group of two people who are at war with their own homosexuality and are taking it out on what they perceive to be gay men coming out of the gay village in Manchester and walking home via the canals. That's my prevailing theory, okay? That's the one I will publicly put out there in the media in terms of a reporter speaks to me. However, you guys all know me. I operate, and some would even say I battle in two worlds. The real world of the material and the five sense reality, the bullshit world that we live in. And I'm also working, fighting, building in the world of the subconscious mind. This is why I'm interested in magic, and this is why I'm interested in psychology, and this is why I'm interested in the occult. Because if I'm not, only the elites will be, only the merchants of nonsense will be, and if I want to fight a war of consciousness, I want to know what weapons the enemy uses so I can fight behind enemy lines. It's as simple as that. And I'm not doing it for any revolutionary purposes. I'm doing this for myself and the people that I love personally. I don't want to save the world. I don't want to save humanity. I can't do that. Only you can save your own life, and I can save my own life and the ones I love. If enough of us did that, then we would probably have a very much nicer and safer world. But as long as we have Occupy, Zeitgeist, Anonymous, Russell Brand, Jeremy Corbyn, blah 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 blah, the latest savior, people will never work on this themselves because they will always be looking for that Jesus Christ archetype, whether it's political or a media or a pundit or any kind of other bullshitter to save them. This is why you also have cults. The same reason. And that's a big problem with human beings in this stage of their development, is they are still lost in the world of requiring a savior, requiring a big daddy to come and save them, or a big mammy. The thing is, like I was saying from day one since I came out public on this scene, the only person who can take care of your own ass is yourself. And my God, will people go insane when you tell them that. That the last thing that they want to hear is that only they can be responsible for themselves. That's the product of Christianity. Absolutely 100%. Because they do not want to be told that there's no localized version or nationalized version or politically or dogmatic version of the Yiddish or the Jewish Hebrew sky fairy that never existed 2,000 years ago, nailed to a plank. They do not want to be told that. They also don't like when you change your opinions. Listen to me very carefully. I have changed my opinions through my life countless times. Why? Because one, I'm not a member of any church, religion or dogma, so I don't need to follow a rule book. Secondly, as new information comes along, I modify or change my opinions. So people say to me, well, a few years ago, you called for a boycott when the Israelis attacked Gaza of Israeli goods, giving the serial number. And I got news for you. If that happened again in the manner that happened that time, I would do the same. Your man Netanyahu is a piece of shit, okay? And he had one last go at Gaza because he knew Obama was a softie, and when Obama was coming in, a hardened Zionist, the biggest Zionist of them all, was coming in with the Clintons' blessing, and he wanted one last chance to get the boot in Gaza, just to do it. And he may have been targeting rebels, but he didn't give a shit if there was lots of civilians killed. He was after Hamas, or he was after whoever he was after, but he didn't give a shit. And that was a bloodbath. That was a bloodbath, okay? But that does not mean that I hate the state of Israel or Israeli people or their right to maintain their borders. Not at all. They're two different topics. Am I crazy about Zionism? No, but I understand why it exists. Europeans had been slaughtering Jews for centuries. What else could they do? What else could they do? Okay? So to me, Zionism was an unfortunate necessity that was born out of the need by European Christians and Muslims in the Middle East to pathologically and constantly pick on Jews and slaughter them. That's why. Do I really care about the Israeli-Palestinian thing? No, only kind of on a humanitarian level. And then people will say, well, why don't you support the Palestinian cause? I'll tell you why. I don't like Islam. And then they'll say, but there's lots of Christians in Palestine. I don't like Christianity. And then I go, well, who's going to take care of these people? They're Arab brothers in the wealthy Emirate states. Why should we in Europe and everywhere else solve problems that the Arabs' own friends in the Gulf states can solve like that? Why? Because they don't give a shit. So why should we? And at the same time too, no Israeli ever did anything to me. I've never met an Israeli I've ever had a problem with. I've never been bothered by Judaism. My life has never been impinged upon by Judaism. By Jesus, I've had to deal with a lot of shit from Muslims. And that doesn't mean Muslim people as individuals. That Islamic religion. It's in the backward past. It has not evolved yet. It is still in that same stage that Christianity was in the Middle Ages. The sword comes first, everything else comes second. Maybe in 1,000 years that will change, but as the things stand right now, if I was given a choice tomorrow to go live in Palestine, Gaza, or Israel, I'd pick Israel in a heartbeat. The Israelis don't throw gay people off the top of buildings for public sport. In Israel, women are treated much better than any Arab country around them. in Israel there's far more tolerance of minorities. Oh, and then they go, oh, what are you talking about? Look up the Druze. Have you ever heard of them? No, you'll never hear about them, will you? The Druze, they're the largest ethnic minority, the second largest ethnic minority, I think, after Israeli Arabs, believe it or not, in Israel. And they serve in the Israeli army, and they're there. So why aren't they complaining? Simple. They're not trying to destroy the state of Israel. It's really that simple. Hamas, Hezbollah and Islamic Jihad have all said that their primary agenda is to destroy the state of Israel, wipe it off the face of the map. Well, if somebody said that about you and your family and your community, how would you react? How would you react? You see, we're back to this thing again. Those of you who are truthers listening to this are probably all anti-Israel, hate Jews, love Palestinians, because that's expected of you. You're a truther. You have to join the team. Well, I got news for you, and all you other truth gurus, pay careful attention to this. What I'm going to say next. I don't care who you are, how big your show is, what conferences you organise. I don't give a flying fuck what you believe, because I have my own opinions, and if you don't like that, that's your tough shit and not mine. It's really that simple. And if you can't handle that, the last thing you should be calling yourself is an open-minded person. I'm not calling for attacks on Gaza or the Palestinians. I'm just saying there's two sides to every story, and right now one side story to me doesn't look quite as bad as it's been portrayed by certain individuals who have a vested interest in doing it because it's a cash cow for them. And there's many people in alt media who dislike Israel immensely, but they respect my opinions. They know that they're sincere. I'm not waving the Star of David here, singing Ava Nagila. I'm just saying, this is my opinions. If you don't like it, you know where the unsubscribe button is, you know where the Celtic jersey is, and you know where the meth clinic is. And you know where all those other kind of people who love to share photographs of kids in the Middle East with their brains hanging out of their skulls all over their Facebook page. Go back to be with that level of consciousness. Be there. Be amongst them. Be amongst them. You cannot believe any full-on stereotype anywhere. I grew up in Ireland when it was run by the Catholic Church. Guess what? I had condoms, I fucked women, I got drugs, I had a great time, I didn't go to church, and I lived an alternative lifestyle. No problems, no one ever bothered me. I read articles in the New York Times about what Ireland was like under the days of the Catholic Church, and they make it sound like you couldn't do any of those things. Everybody I knew was doing those things. Everybody was shagging, everybody was having a great time. It's the same thing with Israel or anywhere else. There are multiple complexities to every society. I remember when I lived in New York, I was going down to Alabama to work for a while, and every single person in New York told me there's nothing but rednecks down there. They're all racist. And guess what I found out was they were far more integrated, particularly the working classes and the middle classes down there in Alabama, than they ever were in New York. New York was full of isolated liberals who sat in their ivory towers pontificating about how diverse and how open-minded they were, and they were fuck all like that. There was far more integration in the Deep South, and black people and white people got on much better down there in a day-to-day, everyday lives. But you switch on the TV and you see films like Mississippi Burning, and of course those things are real. Of course their things are real, just like it's real that there's evil Jewish settlers who shoot Palestinian kids. Just like it's real that there were people in Ireland who were brutalised like the Madeleine Laundries, but that's not the majority. That's not everyone. You cannot impose a concept of absolutism upon a society that's made up of individuals. Always seek the individual. Don't follow dogma. Very, very important. So you can get all fired up all you want listening to this show. I don't give a fucking shit. I couldn't give a toss. Israel might do something in the future, and I'll probably hate them for it. But I don't. Like, am I supposed to hate the English and the British for what happened in Northern Ireland or what happened in the famine? No. Why should I? They didn't do it. They had nothing to do with it. They're people just like me. Just like me. They had nothing to do with it. The only thing that I have a problem with is religion. That's the only thing I'll ever have a problem with. I don't care about skin colour, gender, race, social status. Religion frightens the shit out of me. Absolutely frightens the shit out of me. And if I'm confronted with a situation where I have to pick between two religions, in the case of the Middle East, Islam and Judaism, guess what? I pick the one that's the least dangerous to me. Enough of this. Now, back to the Manchester situation. I told you that was my prevailing theory, my prevailing concept of what I believe may be happening there. Again, I'm not a mind reader. I can't do astral projection and see these things as they happen. I can only make educated guesses and implement theories. There is an esoteric idea. I'm not saying I believe this. I'm not saying this is the answer, but this is how I like to see my life. There's the real world everyday me, and there's the witch me, we'll call me. The witch me. And the witch me, or the druid me, or the shaman me, likes to pontificate in that world as well. Why? If nothing else, it's very creative. If nothing else, it's very interesting. The theatre of the mind has no censorship in my theatre, in my mind. So I'll go all kinds of places. When I was about 12, 13, there was a couple of kids on my street who were a bit younger, around 10, 9, who came screaming down the street, crying, roaring and shouting. It turned out that one of the kids that they were with they were all playing near a quarry near where we lived, an old stone quarry that had filled up with water over the years. And I played in it. I wouldn't swim in it, but I played in it, threw rocks in it, catched frogs and newts and that kind of thing there, hung out there. It was just a stone quarry that filled up with water, very deep. One of their friends that was with them had drowned. The kid could swim. What they said was, and it was reported in the local papers, he walked into the water like he was in a trance, and no matter how many times they called him, he would not come back and kept walking into the quarry water until he was completely submerged. I've heard other stories like this, where people have stared into bodies of water and have been enchanted, and if for no reason anyone can explain, went into them and drowned. There was a very good documentary on Channel 4, and it's on YouTube if you can find it, about the suicides at the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco. And there's lots of footage of people at the end killing themselves. And what's remarkable about it is how they do it. They just walk up to the barrier, climb up onto it, and jump in. Or some of them actually run in, casually, like they're running to catch a bus or a train. And you watch this, and it's almost like there's no reflection of the last moment of their life. It's like they're giving themselves to the water of the bays. In the same documentary, there's one, they interview people who have survived jumping off the Golden Gate Bridge and landing into the bay, and they all said the same thing. They said an unseen force pushed them back up to the surface as if it wasn't their time. Those of you of a certain vintage will remember a TV public information ad that ran on British TV for years and years through the 70s and right through the 80s, called The Spirit of Dark and Lonely Waters. And it was kind of it looked like the Nazgul or the Wraith from Lord of the Rings. and it was always around ponds, and it would show kids, I am the spirit of dark and lonely waters, ready to trap the unwary, the foolish, like these people. And you see these like kids doing silly things and falling into the water and being consumed. One time when I was in America, I slipped at the side of a pond I used to walk by when I was coming home, and I had this impression that I was being dragged into the pond, like it was trying to consume me. You all hear about the idea of holy waters or sacred waters, a certain body of water, a pond, a river, a stream, a well that provides sacred or holy waters. Well, there's also unholy and profane waters. You will always have the duality there. These unholy waters lure people to their deaths. They mesmerize them and enchant them, and they walk into the water for unknown reasons, and they just drown. Think of the dead marshes in the movie The Lord of the Rings. Frodo sees the dead elf under the marsh, and it consumes them. We've all had these experiences where any of you have had like experience in the wild. You slip by a river, you slip by a pond, you fell into a bog. You have this overwhelming sense that you are being consumed. What if stagnant waters that have no replenishment of nutrients, i.e. canals, gather their nutrients by luring people into the water, into the abyss? We all know that water has memory. That's been proven all the time. But water, if it has memory, it has consciousness. And there will be goodly consciousness, and there will be pathological consciousness. There will be waters that will replenish, and there will be waters that will kill. What if the Rochdale Canal is an unsacred or profane body of water? Now remember, this canal does not go through just Manchester alone. It goes all the way up into Yorkshire and joins the Calder River system just past Hebden Bridge. Funny enough, back in 2012, I did a talk in Hebden Bridge, and me and my friends went for a pint along the canal. I did not know that the canal that we were standing by was the Rochdale Canal. I was staring into that water, and it had a very powerful effect on me. There was something about the Rochdale Canal that bugged me, that made me feel cold. Little did I know that I was staring into a canal water where a young girl called Leslie Jo Rimmer had been found dead. Who was the primary suspect? None other than Jimmy Savile. The Rochdale Canal is also the main canal of the Manchester Pusher. My work into Jimmy Savile and my work into the Manchester Pusher are both revolve around the Rochdale Canal. Now, I live in Ireland. I don't live in England. I don't have an emotional or any kind of connection to the Rochdale Canal. But long before I started talking about either Savile, and it's on my blog post, you can actually see the page with the date on it. It's called The Caravan and the Canal. The Rochdale Canal had spoken to me. And I actually wrote this out in the article. There was something about that canal. Little did I know it was going to feature as a major aspect in my life. That canal was mocking me. that canal was talking to me. That canal was communicating with me, because it is a profane water. And I'll just let that sink in. So once again, my website is thomassheridanarts.com or streetdruid.net. And I hope you enjoyed this flyby VON episode. And I will see you again in the electromagnetic spectrum in all my other guises, as well as hopefully in real life in the guise of a friend and a comrade, or someone you can just have a pint with and take the piss out of at some point in the future. www.thomassheridanarts.com, www.streetdruid.net, Open Source Occult TV on YouTube, and feck 'em if they can't take a joke. Need for salvation is a very interesting thing, especially when people talk about their independence, their free will. If you need someone to save you, or you need a counter culture or mainstream culture savior, someone who validates your opinions, you're really a slave. Suffering from a disease, and the disease is that you have not understood that the problem is really your belief in external salvation beyond yourself. If you didn't need to feel this desire to have an authority figure or a celebrity or a politician validate and express your feelings, you wouldn't need these saviors in the first place. And this is the root of the problem. We are very carefully controlled from the time we're children to have a sort of the need for a savior.
There is no turning back. You got to face the truth. It's all you have to do. Hit the ground and run. Take a second glance towards the rising sun.
You grow up with that picture of Jesus Christ with his Dionysian beard and long hair, and his softness and his Aryan looks. And you believe that, deep in your subconscious, that this is someone you need. But you're missing the point completely.
In the belief they are.
the only route to salvation is your own ass. Accept it and please deal with it.